It's all your fault for having a wedding with a woman like that when I'm around. I didn't like it, so I just ruined it. I woke up in the hospital I was taken to, hearing my husband and best friend talking. I remember in the middle of my long-awaited wedding, everything suddenly went black. As I continued to listen to their conversation, they started discussing something shocking. Sleeping pills? It turned out they were having an affair, and my best friend had added sleeping pills to my meal to sabotage the wedding. Knowing the truth, I decided to take revenge on them in my dazed state. My name is Michelle. I'm a stay-at-home mom, living with my husband Tom, and our son Michael. I've always had a complex about one thing, that we never had a wedding. 3 years ago, while I was pregnant with our child, Tom, who I was dating at the time, said, "The order is a bit reversed, and proposed to me." I was over the moon about both the pregnancy and the proposal. However, my parents were strongly opposed. Even during family gatherings, both families maintained their opposition. A shotgun wedding was out of the question. In response to my parents' disapproval, Tom's parents always seemed apologetic and assured me, "No matter what decision you make, we'll make sure to take responsibility." Having an abortion wasn't an option for me, so I went against my parents' wishes and married Tom. At that time, we wanted a wedding but decided against it, considering the expenses of childbirth. Now, almost 3 years after our son's birth, we still haven't had a wedding. It always bothered me. Finally, my husband said, "Let's have a wedding on Christmas." The reason being, I was going to return to work at a hotel next spring, and our son was going to start attending daycare. Knowing we'd be busier then, my husband felt we should have the wedding before that. Of course, I immediately agreed. I was so happy, especially since my husband had been going out more often recently for drinks or other events, and I had started wondering, does he find it boring to be with me, or have I gone from being his lover and wife to just a mom? But it seems those worries were unfounded. The complex I had felt for so long vanished, and the recent concerns about Tom also seemed resolved. Looking back, I realized I was on cloud 9. The day after my husband's suggestion, I began planning the guest list. I have 4 close friends. I've been friends with them since high school, and even through college and starting our careers, we've remained tight-knit. Laura is a hardworking lawyer, Nancy is a working mom of 4-year-old twins, Rachel is currently expecting, and Isabel works at a hotel. Isabel works at the same company as her husband. Though each of us is at a different stage in life, we regularly meet up for meals and trips, always staying in touch. I wanted to hand out wedding invitations to these 4 besties in person, so I decided to organize a lunch gathering. Congratulations on the wedding. That sounds weird, right? Happy wedding, Michelle. Thank you for the invite. Rachel, the pregnant one, exclaimed. Thanks. Tom was like, let's have a wedding. I was so happy. But Rachel, make sure you don't overdo it, okay? You have to take care of yourself. I said, only to be interrupted by Nancy, a mother of 2. No worries, I was working full-time when I was in her shoes. A wedding is a piece of cake. I had a tough time, even with just 1 kid. Everyone is different, so really, Rachel, don't push yourself. While we were discussing, Laura, the lawyer, playfully pinched my right shoulder. Hey, don't flaunt your happiness like that. It's hard for Isabel and me to join the conversation, right, Isabel? Isabel, looking a bit distracted, responded, Huh? Oh yeah, seriously, don't show off. I observed Isabel and felt something was off. She seemed less lively than usual. Isabel was usually the lively one, often considered the cute youngest of our group of 4. So her being unusually silent was definitely off. I wondered if the topics we were discussing were unsettling for Isabel, who was still single, or if they were subjects she would rather we not touch upon. I chose not to delve deeper into it. On the day of my wedding, I was so excited I felt like I could fly. My husband and son were both dressed in matching tuxedos, and I finally got the chapel wedding I had always dreamed of. My parents, who had initially opposed the marriage, finally seemed to accept and acknowledge us. They were all smiles at us, the newlyweds. I was worried about Rachel, who was pregnant, and Isabel, who seemed a bit down, but I was overjoyed to have all 4 of my dearest friends present with me. It was a truly happy and wonderful wedding. I had planned so many special things for the reception afterwards. I was sure it would be a great time. I had no inkling of anything amiss. For the reception meal, we had prepared a French full course. I had often heard brides say they were too nervous to eat much at their reception, but having been married for 3 years already, I was calm and collected. While enjoying the delicious French cuisine, I was comforted watching my son, seated between my husband and me, happily munching on his kid's meal. My son had been such a good boy, sitting quietly. We had promised him that if he got fussy, we would take him too. We took him to sit with his grandparents. He looked so adorable behaving like that. The reception went on without a hitch. Greetings from my husband's boss and colleagues, whom I had worked closely with. A slideshow our friends had made showcasing our family's memories. There were tears and laughter. It truly was a great time. We went for a wardrobe change. My son had drawn patterns on our pristine white dress and suit with fabric crayons, and all three of us matched. For the candlelight service and photo session, I had always known I wanted to wear this dress. After the candlelight service, I took photos with family, relatives, and friends. Everyone complimented my dress, which made me so happy. I caught a glimpse of my husband chatting with Isabel. They knew each other, so there was nothing unusual about it. You see, around the time my husband and I got legally married, Isabel was struggling with workplace harassment at her former job. So she consulted my husband, who worked in HR, and he spoke on her behalf to his company, leading Isabel to transfer there. Since then, it seemed that Isabel often sought job advice from my husband. Considering I worked in a hotel, I figured my husband, being in the same workplace, would be better equipped to counsel her, so I too asked him to look out for Isabel. My husband appeared to be genuinely concerned, regularly assisting her since then. So even when I saw Isabel laughing and taking pictures with my husband, I didn't think much of it. Things took a turn right before I was about to read a letter of gratitude to my parents. It happened while I was listening to a guest's speech. All of a sudden, my vision blurred, and everything in front of me seemed to shake. Up until that point, I felt perfectly fine, but all at once my sight got fuzzy, and my thoughts became jumbled. I've got to hold it together. Even though that's what I thought, maintaining my seated posture became challenging. I'm gonna fall. By the time that thought crossed my mind, I was already on the floor. Michelle, what happened? I could faintly hear the alarmed voices of those around me. Someone shouted, "Call an ambulance," but I wanted to tell them, "No, I'm fine." Yet I couldn't muster the strength to speak. My husband cradled me, constantly reassuring, "It's okay. It's gonna be all right, Michelle. It's just a sleeping pill. Don't you worry. You'll be fine in a jiffy." Sleeping pill? What did he mean by that? I tried to figure it out, but I couldn't, and without understanding what he meant, I lost consciousness. When I came to, I was in a hospital. Beside me, my husband was holding my hand. Once he realized I was awake, he immediately called for the doctor. The doctor's diagnosis? An overdose of sleeping pills. Do you recall taking anything? The doctor asked. Of course, I had no such recollection. My husband seemed just as clueless, and we both shook our heads. The police wanted to get involved, considering the possibility of foul play. I told the police I had no memory of the event and had never taken sleeping pills. My husband stated, "We have no clue. Many people were around our food, so it's hard to say who might be suspicious. Heck, it might even be one of the hotel staff for all we know." I remembered my husband telling me, "It's just a sleeping pill, you'll be all right," before I blacked out, which made his statement seem odd to me. In the end, with neither of us having any leads, the culprit remained unidentified. The police said they would continue their investigation and left. It was decided that I should stay in the hospital for a couple of days just to be safe, and our son would be looked after by my parents. Relatives and friends rushed to the hospital for support. Once I was awake, and after the police finished their inquiries, they left. Left alone in the room, I was in a daze for a while. But after some time feeling thirsty, I decided to grab a drink from the hospital shop. Then, in the hallway on the second floor near the store, I spotted my husband and Isabel together. "What's going on?" I thought as I approached. I couldn't believe my ears when I overheard their conversation. There was no need to go that far. It wasn't a lethal dose, so it's fine. "It's your fault for having a wedding with that woman." when I'm around. I just ruined it because I didn't like it, Isabel said, wrapping her arm around my husband. I couldn't process what was happening. What's their relationship? Are they just colleagues? I wondered, what did she mean by lethal dose? I knew I couldn't get caught listening, so I hid behind a pillar in the hallway to overhear their conversation. My husband caressed Isabel's head, saying, "I'm really sorry. You're the only one that matters to me." I had a feeling Michelle was getting suspicious lately, so I just put on a show with that wedding. I explained it to you, didn't I? I don't want to be taken for a ride with ridiculous child support. It's just until we don't have to spend on Laura anymore, you know? Isabel, narrowing her eyes at her husband, said in a coquettish voice, "You promised, remember?" Hearing that, even I could tell what kind of relationship my husband and Isabel had. They were having an affair, deceiving me, and keeping our marriage intact, while continuing their illicit relationship. It was a marriage of convenience, just for the sake of it. Moreover, Isabel, who wasn't satisfied with even that ceremony, drugged it to ruin it. I'd been betrayed by my husband and Isabel, the two most important people in my life. After that, tears wouldn't stop flowing. I couldn't bear to watch my husband and Isabel being affectionate anymore. I gave up going to the hospital store, returned to my room, and pulled the sheets over my head. My emotions were all over the place, but strangely enough, my mind was clear. The more I thought about it, the more unforgivable my husband and Isabel's actions became. I was filled with regret and sadness. The doctor told me to rest, but I couldn't sleep. I cried all night, and as the sun rose, I was determined to get revenge on the two of them. 24 hours ago, the love I thought I had for my husband, whom I believed I loved so much, had vanished, and the friendship I valued so much with Isabel had disappeared without a trace. With that determination, I began plotting my revenge against the two. Unaware of this, my husband came to visit me first thing in the morning and tried to strike up various conversations. Honestly, it was nothing but stressful. I'm still feeling a bit out of it, so I'm gonna sleep. Saying that, I pulled the covers over and pretended to sleep, all the while lost in thought. I want to take everything away from those two. From my husband, I want to take away our home, his job, and all his money. From Isabel, I want to take away her job, her friends, and my husband. Now, what should I do to achieve that? I couldn't come to a conclusion on my own. However, for now, I needed proof of my husband's and Isabel's affair. I knew that much was necessary. 2 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. Desiring swift revenge on the two of them, the very next day, I headed to a private investigator's office to gather evidence of Tom and Isabel's affair, and to find out if Isabel had been prescribed sleeping pills. I had 2 requests. After that, I contacted Laura, who is a lawyer. Even though she was surprised when I told her we needed to talk right after my discharge, Laura made time for me. The meeting place? Laura's law office. Want to go to a cafe or a restaurant? I replied to her kind offer. I'd like to talk somewhere private. So it was decided to meet at the law firm where Laura worked. In the long run, I had thought of officially hiring her as my attorney, so this might have been for the best. I immediately told Laura everything I had seen that day at the hospital. Laura was visibly shocked, but after some thought, she said, "Come to think of it, Isabel always spoke highly of Tom." Then she added, "If that's the case, we need to gather evidence of their affair. If it's true that Isabel had an affair with Tom and she's behind the incident, that's despicable. I'd like to think of Isabel as my close friend too, so I really don't want to believe this. However, I'll help you gather all the evidence thoroughly. If we don't find any, we'll pretend this conversation never happened. But if we do, I'll be fully on your side, Michelle." I could understand Laura's disbelief. I'd probably have a hard time believing it if I were in Laura's shoes too. For a while, under Laura's guidance, I tried to gather evidence without letting my husband catch on. However, the results weren't great. His phone was securely locked, and he always had it with him. He also seemed cautious, as the number of times he went out drinking had decreased. The private detective I hired had the same results. There were pictures of him and Isabel eating together, traveling in a car, but none of them provided solid evidence of an affair. The only progress was with the sleeping pills. I found out that Isabel, who had been bullied at work 3 years ago, had been prescribed them by a doctor, and I learned the type of drug she had been given. I didn't know what type of sleeping pill I had been given, so I stored this information as evidence to eventually submit to the police. Then I told Laura about the only evidence I found, which was the medicine. Laura suggested, what if Michelle pretends to be away from home? Maybe Tom will let his guard down? No way, I laughed, but Laura was serious. You know, I've handled quite a few divorce cases, and it's surprisingly common for spouses to do things at home when the other is away. I think it's worth giving it a shot, so I decided to give it a try. The timing was mid-February, right around Valentine's Day. I want to take our son and visit my parents in Nebraska before I start working in March, I told him. When I said that, Tom responded, sounds great. Go ahead, and he was supportive. I told him I'd be gone for a week, leaving on a Thursday and coming back the following Wednesday. In reality, the plan was to stay in Nebraska for a couple of nights, show Tom pictures and video calls of us there to reassure him, and then see if anything happened over the weekend. It was all Laura's idea. She also suggested setting up hidden cameras at 3 points in the house: the entrance, living room, and bedroom. This was also Laura's idea, and the camera was something she borrowed from an acquaintance of hers. As planned, I sent Tom pictures of my son and me in Nebraska and made video calls to him. He genuinely seemed happy to see us having a good time. Maybe I had misunderstood what happened at the hospital. I couldn't see any evidence of an affair. I couldn't see any signs of abnormal behavior from my husband, but the next day shattered that notion. I checked the surveillance cameras that I had set up and noticed that first thing in the morning, Tom had turned off the pet camera we use for our son, or covered it with cloth. My husband was clearly acting strange, and then at 7 p.m. it wasn't just my husband who came home from work. He brought Isabel with him. It was Friday, so it must have been the perfect opportunity for the two of them to spend time together, since they had the next day off. I quickly contacted Laura and asked her about Isabel, the woman my husband was cheating with. After Laura sounded disappointed, she said, "Come back here tomorrow. We're going to get revenge on those two." She said that to me. As I watched the surveillance footage, I saw my husband and Isabel getting cozy. I stared at the screen, thinking about the revenge plan that Laura and I had come up with. The next day, I had to go back home after being called into work. I told my parents and had them look after my son. I was hesitant to tell them the truth, but I knew if I did, my dad would say, "Hold on, I'm coming too." I could already picture him causing a scene, so I held back. When I returned to New York, I visited Laura's office. She greeted me with a worried look and asked, "Michelle, are you okay?" I replied, I'm fine. Sure, I was shocked for a moment when I saw it yesterday, but I have no love or affection left. I just want to break things off as soon as possible. Besides, knowing I'll have evidence makes me kind of excited. Laura seemed relieved by my response. Then, the two of us reviewed the surveillance footage to finalize our plan. Once we confirmed that my husband and Isabel had left the house, we would break in. We had already secured some space for Laura and me in the bedroom closet, so we would hide there. We would monitor the surveillance footage, wait for my husband and Isabel to come home, and make our move when they showed evidence. During that time, I would snap photos with my smartphone while Laura recorded a video. However, my cautious husband didn't seem to want to leave the house at all. Isabel tried persuading him several times, saying, "Come on, let's go out. Let's have a date." But he declined every time. Impatiently, we watched as they finally left in the car to get groceries for dinner. As soon as Laura and I confirmed that, we executed our plan. We quickly went back to the house and successfully hid in the closet. After waiting for about an hour, my husband and Isabel returned, holding hands. It seemed like Isabel was going to cook dinner wearing an apron, but it was evident she had nothing on underneath. Seeing Isabel like that, my husband, seemingly overwhelmed by passion, pushed her onto the couch and started to make a move. We exchanged glances and nodded, then left the closet and approached the two of them. The first to notice me was my husband, who had been holding Isabel from behind. Our eyes met and my husband froze for about 5 seconds, then turned pale, and immediately let go of Isabel. "Why did you stop?" Isabel said in a playful voice, lifting her head, and she froze too. She said to the two of them, "I knew you two were in that kind of relationship. I wanted proof, but couldn't get any. That's why I made up the story about going back home. Now I can get a divorce." "When did you find out?" my husband asked, his voice trembling. "I overheard you two at the hospital, so I knew you both drugged me." "Wait a minute, that's not true. I didn't drug her. It was Isabel who did it on her own." As expected, my husband spilled the beans about the drug. "Did you get it, Laura?" "Got it perfectly." With that, Laura entered the living room. "Why the heck is Laura here?" The first to react was Isabel. "Michelle hired me. I didn't want to believe that Isabel was cheating and drugging drinks, so I was helping her gather evidence to prove it wrong. But I was shocked to see that it was actually true on the video." "What do you mean by request?" Tom, having met Laura a few times and knowing her profession, asked anxiously. "Tom, what you did counts as infidelity. Michelle has the right to divorce you and claim alimony." "Well, hold on. It's not like that. It was just a fling with Isabel." "Please don't get the wrong idea." Laura's words shook him, and the husband quickly denied them. "Wait a minute. A fling? You told me once our kid grows up, you were gonna divorce Michelle, didn't you? Was that a lie?" "Of course it was. Who the hell would choose someone like you over their family?" Isabel was at a loss for words at her husband's harsh statement. Seeing Isabel's reaction, Laura decided to pile on more. "I'm sorry to say this when you're upset, Isabel, but we also got testimony that you drugged Michelle's drink. So what? You can be charged with a crime of injury. The police will be here any minute now." "What?" Laura was speechless. She seemed too shocked to say anything. "Wait. Stop it. It was just a joke, right? Tom, help me out here." Isabel cried out to her husband for help. Tom ignored Isabel's pleas. Laura said to him, "If you knew that Isabel was mixing in sleeping pills, there's a chance you could be considered an accomplice." "Why me? She did that on her own." Afterwards, when the police arrived and were shown the footage we had taken earlier, both Isabel and her husband were taken to the station for questioning. Additionally, when I mentioned the information I had obtained from a private investigator about her being prescribed sleeping pills, they responded, "We will thoroughly investigate that matter as well." I was told that, after Tom and Isabel were taken away, I booked a hotel room and toasted with Laura. I didn't want to spend another second in that house. And for the final touch at the hotel, I sent videos of the affair and the testimony about the sleeping pills to the company where Tom and Isabel worked. The effect was immediate. A week later, Isabel's husband was questioned at the police station. Fortunately, he wasn't charged, but he did lose his job. After the company saw the two videos and confirmed the facts, several testimonies came forward about the two acting suspiciously at work. As a result, my husband was forced into voluntary retirement. Everything went according to mine and Laura's plan. Around that time, I began discussions about divorcing my husband. My husband came alone to Laura's office. "Didn't you hire a lawyer?" he replied. "I asked a friend, but they turned me down because they said the odds were overwhelmingly against me." Then, after taking a deep breath, he began to plead. "That's not why I came today. I came to ask for Michelle's forgiveness. Please, I'll pay alimony or whatever it takes. Just don't divorce me." Saying this, my husband got on his knees and begged. I was unmoved by his pleas. Why would anyone want to get back with a man who cheated and is now unemployed? At least I don't. "Let's get a divorce." "No, I'll never do it again." "Please reconsider. And Tom Jr. needs his father, right?" I was disgusted that he would bring up our son at this point. "We don't need a jobless father who's been unfaithful. Even without you, I'm confident I can raise our child without any hardship." Despite what I said, my husband tried to continue with his excuses and begging. Laura interrupted him. "This isn't going anywhere. Should we bring this to mediation?" "Tom, you're clearly at a disadvantage. The legal fees will just deplete your savings. For us, as long as we get the divorce, it doesn't matter how. But for you, it'll just be like throwing your money away." Tom held his head in his hands and let out a scream. After pondering for a good 5 minutes, he finally agreed to the divorce. My husband finally said, "Give me some time to think." he said in a strained voice and then left the office. Seeing his state, Laura and I couldn't contain our laughter and burst out laughing. 2 weeks later, Tom messaged me agreeing to the divorce and we decided to meet again. The location was once again Laura's office. My husband, who came, looked extremely worn out. It seemed like he had given up this time, as he unemotionally accepted all the terms Laura proposed. In the end, he would pay a compensation of $15,000, monthly child support of $400, and I would also get half of my husband's severance pay. We settled on the agreement with no division of assets for my husband. However, he seemed unable to find a new job and begged, "Can I make the compensation payments in installments?" Without any division of assets, the only money he had was his severance pay. Being jobless, he probably had no choice but to use that for living expenses. Reluctantly, I agreed to let him pay in installments by increasing the compensation to $16,000 as interest. And so we got divorced without a hitch. I managed to get the money as planned and rendered my husband jobless. I believe I took everything from my husband, family, job, and money. Next is Isabel. For days after the divorce was finalized, I got a call from Isabel's lawyer, asking to settle the matter of the wedding out of court. Just like always, we decided to discuss it at Laura's office. As soon as Isabel entered the office, she pleaded, kneeling down, "Please forgive me. I'll pay any amount of compensation." Recalling my husband groveling in Laura's office, I had to chuckle. "Not gonna happen." That's what I replied. "Why? Are we friends?" Unhurt. The look on Isabel's face made me angry. "Who had an affair with a friend's husband and then drugged me?" "It was you who betrayed me first, wasn't it, Isabel? I don't consider you a friend anymore." "That's harsh. The sleeping pills weren't a big deal, and I broke up with Tom, didn't I?" Isabel shouted back. "So what? I'm still hurt. Besides, if you want Tom, he's all yours." As I said this, Isabel seemed a bit pleased. "But just so you know, he's unemployed. He quit his job after the affair with you got out. Now he's jobless and can't even pay me alimony. If you're okay with such a man, go ahead. I guess you're content with my leftovers," I said with a smug face. Suddenly, Isabel shrieked and lunged at me. Quickly, her lawyer stepped in to intervene. "That was an attempted injury, right?" Laura remarked, causing the lawyer's expression to darken. "As for the wedding issue, feel free to sue. But please let this one slide," the lawyer pleaded. Laura asked me, "Michelle, are you okay with this?" When I nodded in agreement, Laura said, "All right, we'll drop the settlement. We'll proceed with suing Isabel." "No way, Laura, that's too harsh." "I never did anything to you," I exclaimed. "I'm not your friend. Nancy and Rachel, after hearing about this, were disgusted with you. Don't you think you're out of friends?" Laura said, causing Isabel to begin crying hysterically. "That's so unfair. What did I even do?" Probably fearing another assault, Isabel was practically dragged out of the office by her lawyer. Laura and I burst into laughter. "No matter what you did, it wasn't an affair and an injury case." Well, which one is worse? But with this, I successfully took away Isabel's job, friends, and husband. I felt very satisfied. It's been 6 months since then. In the end, since we didn't settle out of court, Isabel was arrested for causing injury. Isabel's parents apparently heard about the arrest from Laura and her friends, and they came to apologize with compensation. According to her parents, she won't likely get probation because she's been denying and showing a bad attitude. We've tried talking to her, but she seems to have given up and won't listen. On the other hand, her ex-husband seems to be struggling just to pay the compensation. He apparently hasn't been able to find a full-time job yet and is working a construction-related part-time job during the day. At night, he's juggling a job in the cleaning industry, desperately trying to cover alimony, child support, and his own living expenses. I'd be in a bit of a bind if the money stopped coming in, so I hope he doesn't work himself to the ground. As planned, I returned to my job at the hotel. I've been leaving my son in daycare, so I feel bad he might be lonely, but I make sure to spend all my off days playing with him. With the money I got from my ex-husband, I can easily make a down payment on a condo, so I'm also house hunting. Once things settle down at the hotel, I'm gonna pay the down payment and buy it. My current life, with work and time with my son, is much more fulfilling and fun than when I was a stay-at-home mom, living with my ex. Moving forward, I want to cherish this life and hope to someday meet someone great. I'm not exactly pretty-faced, and to be blunt, I'm overweight. Yet despite this, a man married me, a man I genuinely loved. Now that I'm pregnant, he told me, I hate poor people like you. I'm gonna divorce you, a fat and ugly woman like you. Raise the child in your belly on your own. I can't believe he said such hurtful things to me. I wonder how he could say that to me. My name's Catherine. Growing up, I was never the center of attention, always in the quieter groups. To be honest, I've always been on the heavier side, and I'm well aware I don't have a traditionally cute face. So I never really had admirers. But surprisingly, I was quite athletic in school and was one of the top performers during PE. The female gym teacher would often compliment me, saying, Catherine, you're so flexible and healthy. Your skin even glows more than anyone else's. I suppose being top-notch in PE was the only area where I could shine. And having a gym teacher notice that made me incredibly happy. After high school, I chose to attend a beauty and health vocational school. I genuinely enjoyed learning about makeup techniques, body mechanics, and how to maintain good posture. I was among the top students, and I felt this was my calling. Eventually, I found a job at a spa that offered massages. It wasn't a big company, and the pay wasn't great, but I felt a sense of purpose, and many clients requested me. The spa wasn't exclusively for women. Men could also get oil massages and relaxation massages. One of the male clients was Bob. Bob once said after one of my massages, "You're really good. I don't think I can get a massage from anyone but you." He praised me a lot. He even advised, why not spread your skills more? You're that good. It felt great to be complimented on something I'm confident in, so I naturally developed feelings for him. I mean, anyone can do what I do, but yeah, I trained all the staff here. I replied modestly, but deep down I was falling for Bob. Perhaps he sensed my feelings, because he eventually asked me out. Bob knew many trendy places and he was fun to talk to. Being with him always lifted my spirits, and I started thinking of marriage. And maybe he sensed that too, because he proposed and we got married. It felt like the peak of my life. I mean, I never stood out in school, wasn't particularly pretty, and was overweight. Because of that, I never experienced being popular or sought after. Yet, I was able to marry such a wonderful man. We rented a small apartment and began our life as a married couple. I imagined a future filled with endless smiles and happiness. I would even daydream to that extent. But those hopes were too idealistic. The times of such joyful smiles didn't last very long. My sister became the source of trouble in our marriage. Yes, I have an older sister named Rachel. Rachel was the opposite of me, pretty and with a great figure. She was always popular with the boys in school, and she dated so many that I doubt she could even keep track. But to be honest, I never really liked Rachel. She always looked down on me because of our contrasting appearances. Catherine, look at this dress. Isn't it cute? You should try wearing something like this. Oh, but I doubt it would fit you. The dress would probably feel so tight, she teased, laughing. Another time she said, oh my, someone confessed their feelings to me again, even though I told them I have a boyfriend. I must be super attractive. Catherine, you're lucky. You probably don't have such problems, right? She would often make these annoying remarks. But I couldn't retort because Rachel wasn't wrong. I had always hoped to avoid her as much as possible since she was always like this. But suddenly, Rachel started visiting the apartment where Bob and I lived. It was right around the time when I found out I was pregnant. Unexpectedly, Rachel said with sincerity, Catherine, you're pregnant? Congratulations. Hearing that, I was a bit shocked. Maybe her perspective changed since I got married. My feelings of surprise turned to joy. However, I felt a bit off shortly after. After looking around our place, she asked, is Bob not home today? I thoughtlessly told her he was at work, but she kept talking about him. So what's Bob like? Does he get weekends off? Where do you guys usually go for dates? I was bombarded with questions. I felt she spent more time talking about that than my pregnancy. It started to bring back all the negative feelings I had about her. But she just asked her questions and then left. The short interaction left me feeling drained. But after that, almost every weekend, Rachel started coming over. Bob was home on weekends, and initially, Rachel was all smiles and greeted him. Bob, You're gonna be a dad soon. Congratulations. But as her visits became frequent, she began to focus her attention solely on Bob, barely acknowledging me. Moreover, she started showing up in stylish clothes she usually wouldn't wear. I've never been much of a catch, but after all, I'm still a woman. I could see through Rachel's intentions. She was definitely coming to see Bob. It was evident from the way her voice and expressions became more feminine around him. Despite my growing discomfort, the bond between them seemed to be strengthening. I had always believed that Bob wouldn't fall for someone like Rachel, especially now that he's my husband. But as time went on, I couldn't help but feel uneasy about their relationship. As time passed, I began to feel an unsettling atmosphere, like my trust in him was being eroded. While Rachel and Bob's relationship appeared to grow closer, Bob's attitude towards me seemed to be cooling. Usually, when he'd come home from work, he'd say with a bright voice, "I'm home. I've had a long day, and can't wait to eat your cooking." And during dinner, he'd praise, "This is so delicious. I'm so lucky to eat your cooking every day." However, a few weeks after Rachel started visiting, those kind words vanished. Instead of his usual demeanor, when Bob came home from work, he'd sigh and grumble, "Man, today was exhausting. Why on earth does the boss talk so darn long?" And during dinner, he started to complain, "I really wanted to eat some meat today. This isn't filling at all." I felt increasingly lonely and finally confronted Bob. "Hey, have you been irritated lately? Why does every day seem so miserable to you?" To my surprise, Bob shot me an angry glare, something I hadn't seen even when we were dating. "What? I don't want to hear that from you. You don't understand anything. After all, you just work some slow-paced job and earn peanuts." His words felt harsh, almost like verbal abuse. I was deeply hurt, on the verge of tears. I never wanted to fight, but I couldn't stay silent either. "I don't work slowly and my salary isn't that low." Before I could say more, Bob cut me off. "That's enough. I'm gonna take a bath and then hit the hay." And with that, he headed straight to the bathroom. From then on, Bob often came home late and was constantly on his phone when he was home. I had a growing sense of unease, especially since I was nearly 7 months pregnant. I didn't want to think negatively, but there were things I couldn't help but wonder about. One day I gently prodded, "Rachel hasn't been around lately, has she?" Indeed, Rachel, who used to visit almost weekly, had suddenly stopped coming. However, Bob nonchalantly replied, "Who knows? Rachel lives in the next town over. If we wanted to see her, we could, anytime." This response alarmed me. I had never mentioned that Rachel lived in the neighboring town. Moreover, Rachel had just moved there barely a month ago. By that time, she had already stopped coming to our apartment. Unable to contain my suspicions any longer, I blurted out, "How do you know Rachel lives in the next town? Are you hiding something with her?" "It sure seems like it." I finally blurted it out clearly. It was clear how much Bob meant to me, which is why I expressed my feelings. Myself, I expressed my feelings so strongly because I wanted to convey how I truly felt. However, Bob seemed indifferent. Instead, he smirked and said, all right, I get it. If you're gonna be this way, we should just break up." Honestly, I'm not interested in women who have gained weight like you. And with your low earnings, life isn't enjoyable. I don't like being poor. Divorce may be our only option. I was overwhelmed with shock, anger, and sadness, especially with our baby on the way. "That's so cruel. What about our child?" In rapid succession, he retorted, "Raise the kid by yourself. I'm not gonna be that child's father anymore. Look, I prefer beautiful women with great figures like Rachel. I've decided to marry Rachel once I divorce you. So you're useless to me now. I married you because you were good at massages and seemed like you could handle the housework, but I'm over it." He was just going off. I couldn't even get a word in. But being told such blunt truths made me change my feelings instantly. There's no point in being with this man anymore. Actually, I realized I didn't want to be with him. Surely Bob and Rachel had something going on. With my feelings completely cooled, I told him, "All right, let's break up then. Take care." Then, I handed him the business card of the divorce attorney I had prepared for this situation. "Wow, you're quick. I can divorce you right away with this. Once it's finalized, I might just head over to Rachel's place. You can keep living your broke life." Bob was all excited as he took the business card, but if he truly planned on marrying Rachel, that excitement would probably fade pretty quickly, wouldn't it? But he didn't seem to realize that yet. So, I immediately started preparing to move out. I quickly secured a new place and decided to live there for a while. My belly was starting to show, and I was thinking of taking a break from work. About a month after I left our home, my phone rang one day. It was Bob. Even if I didn't answer, I knew what he wanted. Still, I picked up to settle things. His voice was frantic. "Hey, where are you? Do something, come on." I calmly responded, "I'm in one of the new luxury condos. It's spacious, has a great view, and it's perfect." There was a pause from Bob. "What? How can someone as broke as you afford such a place?" He'd probably think that way, wouldn't he? After all, he just assumed I was broke without knowing the whole story. But to be clear, why? Because I have around $700,000 in savings. And my monthly income is around $50,000. He probably wouldn't believe it, but it was true. What I mean is, sure, the income from treatments at that workplace alone might not have been that much. However, the truth is, I was actually allowed to have a side job within that workplace. I taught remote massage classes online. At the workplace, I became an instructor, teaching beauty and health courses, including massage techniques. Initially, the spa owner appreciated my skills and knowledge, suggesting I try it. The staff at the same workplace also acknowledged that they improved faster, thanks to my teachings. However, in the beginning, there wasn't much in terms of results. It was probably like that when I first started dating Bob, too. Things changed, and now I have about 2,000 students nationwide. With a $50 membership fee, I made $100,000 monthly. I got half of it, so my share was really $50,000. When I told Bob this, he shouted, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" We wouldn't have divorced. And we could have lived in a better house. Too little, too late. He had always seen me as just a housemaid, good for chores and massages. He had always assumed I didn't earn much. Regarding the house choice with Bob, I told him I was matching your income level. After all, we agreed to split living expenses. So, if you're calling that a poor lifestyle, doesn't that mean your income isn't that great to begin with? I made sure to say it plainly. And, to twist the knife further, I added sarcastically, "But, are you happy now that you married Rachel? I heard you two really did get hitched. Congratulations." The reason this stings is because he must be facing hefty financial demands. What the hell? I'm not happy at all. And what's this alimony about? Indeed, I had consulted with a private investigator about Bob even before our divorce. So after our divorce, I received evidence of him cheating with Rachel. So I tried claiming compensation for emotional distress, but the tragedy doesn't end there for Bob. Turns out, Rachel had a significant debt, and she was making Bob pay for it. Rachel always attracted a lot of attention, and she was notorious for her affairs. Furthermore, Rachel had previously been through a divorce. The reason for their separation was Rachel's infidelity. Consequently, she had been charged with child support and property division due to that divorce. To cover these payments, Rachel had already accumulated a significant amount of debt. I was of course aware of this. Now the situation is a reflection of Bob's decision to marry such a woman. Moreover, I'll also be claiming child support for the baby I'm carrying. So, with our divorce, Bob now faces a slew of hefty payments and has started a life burdened with debt. When I explained all this, Bob exclaimed, "Hey, the baby in your belly is mine, right? A child needs a father, right, Catherine?" But who was the one who cruelly called me ugly and fat? Now, it's too late for such remarks, and there's no way I'm going to accommodate him. If you need money, why not spread your skills to everyone? He told me, remember, that everyone would benefit from Catherine's expertise. I took that advice, and look where I am now. You should do the same, I suggested. It's pretty ironic, really, because even though he was the one who suggested it, I was the one who acted on his advice, earning a high income. He neglected to notice my growing income and rashly labeled me as poor and then discarded me. Now he's the one leading a life of poverty. Nowadays, Rachel keeps telling him, "What's wrong with you? I thought you were a capable man, but you're nothing but common folk. Work harder and earn more money. You're just a man to repay my debts." Come to think of it, when Rachel asked about Bob in the past, I thought it would be best to speak slightly favorably of him, so maybe I embellished the truth a bit. But, all things considered, since both have similar life stories and ended up together, maybe they should just figure things out together. That's what I conveyed before ending the call. Nowadays, Bob is working day and night, juggling his main job and side jobs, trying to repay the massive debt he's incurred. All while Rachel, his wife, doesn't seem to be working earnestly at all. It's a living nightmare. Well, can't be helped. Bob not only abandoned me, but also the child in my womb. It's only fitting as a punishment. On the other hand, a couple of months later I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. While he's been dealt the card of not having a father, my parents and my workplace's owner have been supportive, and the child is growing up well. The initial months of raising a child meant I couldn't engage in any work-related activities. But fortunately, I had savings. Unexpectedly, even after my temporary retirement, my archived instructional videos kept generating steady income. Thanks to that, my child and I are leading a comfortable life. It all happened when we were sitting at the reception desk at our wedding. I've come here to get my compensation for the affair. Both John and I were literally dumbfounded. But what surprised me even more was the fact that John had indeed cheated. Damn, I thought I'd never get caught. And he was justifying it, making it impossible to have a proper conversation. Do you really think you have any appeal as a woman? I married you because you can cook well, and you have a body that looks like it can bear healthy children. Stop kidding around. I had reached my limit and slapped John right across the face. Until now, no matter how rude John was, I had always gotten through it with a smile and a joke. But this time, I couldn't let it slide. I swore to myself that I wouldn't be satisfied until I had cornered him. On the long-awaited morning of our wedding, I was in the dressing room, wrapped in a pure white dress, secretly hoping that John would tell me, "Lily, you look beautiful." John had been high-spirited since the day before, genuinely looking forward to the wedding. I thought he would be pleased to see me looking different. In fact, I looked better than usual in the mirror, and both my parents and my in-laws praised me. I'm a bit on the chubby side and usually dress plainly. But today, I thought I should be allowed to enjoy being the star of the show. John and I are from the same university. When I was a freshman, he was a senior. I was a member of the broadcasting club, and that's how I met John, who was the captain of the sports team and a well-known figure on campus. Our relationship developed smoothly, and we submitted our marriage registration before our wedding, and we've been living together for the past 3 months. Living together made the wedding preparations more efficient. The wedding venue was about a 10-minute train ride from our house. It was a casual restaurant without any formality. The beautiful and stylish interior made it very popular for private parties. John entered the dressing room. I suppressed my excitement and asked, "Does the dress suit me?" Immediately, John broke into a wide smile and stroked my head. "You've still got a round belly, haven't you? I hope you'll give birth to a healthy baby." I was utterly dumbfounded. Even our parents frowned. At least don't say that today. Why? It's the truth. I even went on a diet to fit into this dress for the wedding, you know? I forced a smile and patted my belly. In such moments, I feel bad inside, but I always try to brush it off with a joke. One of John's shortcomings is that once he gets too carried away, he can't stop himself. He was teasing and said, "Hey, your belly looks like a balloon. The bride is supposed to be the most beautiful woman on her wedding day. Stop it before you hurt Lily's feelings." John pretended not to know what he had done wrong, saying, "Well, a fat person is a fat person. I'm sorry for our son, he's always been childish. Even though you are younger, you are much more mature." There was no blame for my mother-in-law. I don't mind. It's just his usual behavior. He was his usual self. I flashed a grin and laid on the sarcasm as thick as I could. The two of us quickly pulled ourselves together and took our seats at the reception desk. We wanted a homey wedding and decided to greet the guests personally, both as the bride and groom. Sadly, most of my friends live on a distant island where my parents' home is, so they couldn't make it. On the flip side, John had a lot of acquaintances attending. We were okay with the imbalance. My parents and I had made our peace with it. I saw this as a golden opportunity to meet many of John's friends and was actually looking forward to the greetings. John introduced each guest to me, one by one. Every single one of them seemed delighted to meet me, complimenting me with "You look like a beautiful bride." There was one guest in particular that stood out. A woman named Natasha. She was an acquaintance from work, as I understood. She seemed to be in her 40s, but she had this actress-like aura, especially in her dress and her tall, slender figure. "Nice to meet you, Lily. I've always been under John's," she greeted me. "Oh, is that so?" I was certainly overwhelmed by Natasha. He's a looker, right? And she's got her stuff together at work. Quite a different story from someone else I know. She indeed had the aura of someone who's competent at her job. Her designer suit fitted her perfectly without being too flashy, and her makeup was flawless. John was looking at Natasha with a kind of admiration in his eyes that he never showed to me, and Natasha was gracefully accepting his attention. They exchanged words for quite a while. Right now, I'm a full-time housewife, but originally I left my job because of John's wishes. He insisted that he wanted me to focus on our home. I had only been at my job for 2 years. Just when things were starting to get interesting, I felt pressured to resign. When I think about the unfinished business at my old job, I still feel a tug at my heartstrings. Looking at Natasha, who seemed so dazzling, made these feelings even stronger. This is wrong. Today's supposed to be about us. Our guests should leave, having had a good time. I swallowed the anger rising inside me due to John's insensitive remark, and kept up with the greetings. Then a middle-aged man in a suit appeared. He had this impressive demeanor, almost like a distinguished actor. "Who's that gentleman over there?" I looked at John, but he seemed to be as clueless as I was. Maybe he wandered in by mistake. It's supposed to be a private event. Just as I was wondering how to handle this situation, the man spoke up. "I'm here to discuss the compensation for an affair." Excuse me? John and I were literally stunned. "I'm in this line of work." The man handed out his business card with a professional demeanor. It bore the name of a well-known company, and his job title was impressive. He was dressed in an expensive suit, and he carried himself with calm and composure. He didn't seem like he was making things up. "Are you John? Could you please break it off with my wife?" "Wait a minute. John and I are getting married today." I tried to calm the man down, but then I noticed John trembling beside me. "What are you talking about?" John managed to squeeze out those words, though his voice was clearly strained. "My wife should be here somewhere. Don't play dumb, it won't get you anywhere." Wait. Natasha and I aren't like that." "Well, you've just admitted it yourself, haven't you?" "So you're having an affair with my wife, Natasha, right?" I couldn't hide my shock. "Natasha, you mean the woman we just greeted?" "I believe so. What did he say about Natasha?" "I heard it was work-related." "Actually, Natasha doesn't work." The man sighed deeply. "Let's change the place. Can we use the green room?" I asked my parents to handle the reception, and went ahead to the green room. The man, who introduced himself as Kyle, sat down on the sofa in the green room and started talking. It's a blatant lie that Natasha has anything work-related to do with John. I found out through her phone records that she met John on a dating site. My in-laws, who were already in the green room, exclaimed in surprise, "We didn't know anything about this. Don't make strange accusations, we could sue you for defamation." But Kyle remained calm. It seems that Natasha has been having an affair with John for 2 years. This time, I couldn't help raising my voice. 2 years ago, but we've been dating since our college days. Isn't this some kind of mistake? The phone records show it clearly. Actually, I've been very busy with work for the last few years, with lots of business trips and overtime. It seems that Natasha had the affair when I wasn't looking. Saying this, Kyle took an envelope out of his bag. Inside were printed screenshots of Natasha's smartphone and a couple of photos of her with John. This is definitely John in these photos, isn't it? My parents gathered around, and we all checked the photos. I've been away from home a lot. I can't say I was blameless. But does that justify an affair? My parents muttered in unison, "No, it doesn't." More than anything, Kyle's demeanor was incredibly convincing. From a certain point, Natasha started wearing a new wristwatch. It was a very nice design, so I looked it up and found out it was a gift from John. I found out it was part of a pair. I wondered who had the other one, and that's when my investigation began. Kyle had been investigating Natasha's actions during his breaks at work and discovered that she frequently visited a certain station. It turned out to be the station closest to John's company. They were frequently meeting up after John finished work. Kyle then took out several photos from the envelope that appeared to be taken secretly. They clearly showed John and Natasha getting cozy in a bustling district. Do you find it fun to stalk like this? Don't take your frustrations out on me just because you can't keep your wife happy. John's words were bold, but his voice was clearly trembling. The serial number on my wife's wristwatch is 118. What about your wristwatch? My parents restrained Kyle. I took off John's wristwatch and looked at the back of the dial. It's 118. This is a unique number in the world, right? Is it just a coincidence? How could that be? The evidence is all here. Why don't you just admit it and tell the truth? Suddenly, John raised his voice and started kicking the chairs in the green room. Damn it, I thought I'd never get caught. John, is what this man is saying true? Without looking at us, John answered while fiddling with his smartphone. There's just one thing that's different. I really do love Natasha. My in-laws whispered to each other in a confused tone. Today I invited her because Natasha said she wanted to see Lily. At that moment, there was a knock on the green room door. Natasha came in from the guest room. Apparently, John had called her with his smartphone. John, do you really love me? Of course. My feelings are all for you, Natasha. Natasha and John hugged each other without any hesitation. This time I couldn't just laugh it off as a joke. I carefully chose my words and asked John, "Is it true that you've been cheating since Natasha got married? I reluctantly decided to marry you. We met a bit too late, didn't we?" If I had met John sooner, I would have married him instead of ending up with such an uncool person. Kyle straightened up from the sofa and said with a resolute attitude, "See, they're so selfish, aren't they? I'm thinking about divorcing my wife, but I'm definitely going to demand proper compensation for it." At the word alimony, John and Natasha momentarily flinched. John, did you know that Natasha was married when you started dating her? Yeah, I found out a while after we met, but by then, we were already serious about each other. So, you were cheating on me too, weren't you? Unexpectedly, John shook his head. This isn't cheating, because I have no feelings for you. Then why were you dating me? You were just for housekeeping. What does just for housekeeping mean? According to John, Natasha was his true love, but he needed someone to take care of the household, and he wanted children, so he decided to marry me. It seemed he also judged that it would be a good cover to get married around this time for the company and society. Do you really think you're attractive as a woman? I married you because you could cook a little, and you seemed like you could bear strong children. I've had enough. I reached my limit and slapped John. It was the first time I had ever hit someone. My right hand was tingling. At the same time, I felt disgusted as if I had touched something filthy. Immediately, Kyle pulled out a wet wipe from his bag and handed it to me. Gratefully, I took it and wiped my hands thoroughly. Ow, what the hell are you doing? You think you're in a position to defy me? Even my mother-in-law couldn't stay silent at his words. Have you always talked to Lily like that? Ah, no, Mom, I just lost my temper for a moment. Hey, Lily, I got scolded because of you. It's your fault. There's no way that's true. Is it really true that you've been cheating for the past 2 years? John snorted triumphantly. You can't trust what this guy says. Besides, the photos might be fake. But, judging from your interactions, it seems like you two really are dating, aren't you? That doesn't prove anything. What, do you have a video or something? I cut into the conversation with my usual surprised tone. Ah, I have it on video. What? Actually, I had secretly recorded today's situation in the dressing room with a hidden camera, planning to show it as a surprise later. I took out the camera from behind the flower arrangement in the room and checked the footage. From the part where John called me fat to where Kyle confronted him about the affair, everything was recorded, unexpectedly turning into big news. But it should be sufficient evidence of the affair. Well done, Lily. And as for this guy, Lily, I am truly sorry. My in-laws both apologized to me together. You don't need to apologize. No, it's also our fault for spoiling John and letting him become like this. What can we do to make it up to you? John, you should. John, you should apologize too. No way. I haven't done anything wrong. Loving someone is a good thing, right? That's what Mom taught me. That's not what I meant. Stop talking back and apologize to Lily right now. It's okay. The foolish one here is John. John? Natasha, how about making a cheating confession in front of the camera? Say cheese. I grinned and pointed the camera at them. I didn't expect to have this side of me. Hey, don't make that face. Just joke around and reply like you always do. This is my way of joking around. I can't overlook this. Then should we cancel the wedding? You're the one who's going to be embarrassed. I was at a loss for words. The party's start time had already passed. The guests must be waiting for our entrance at the venue. No, I should stick to my own decision. Fortunately, I had only invited a few guests, all of whom were trusted close friends, so I could make up for it later. The one who really deserves pity here is John. He cares about appearances, so he invited his bosses from work and even his mentors from his college days. Alright, I've got it. Let's start the wedding ceremony. However, just to let you know, we're gonna change the flow a bit. I went out to the venue and took the microphone from the MC. John followed behind me. There was a round of applause from the audience. Thank you all for gathering here today. We were supposed to hold a wedding ceremony, but today's event has been changed to an emergency press conference. The venue suddenly became noisy with whispers and murmurs, with clear and articulate pronunciation, as if I had been trained in broadcasting. I continued. Today, we have a guest named Natasha, who is an acquaintance of John through work. But in reality, well, John? I turned the microphone towards John like an interviewer. The people in the venue looked puzzled. John hesitated to speak, so I pressed him further. What is your real relationship with her? Voices from the audience also started to chime in, urging him to spill the beans already. Still, John seemed determined to remain silent. If this weren't in front of so many people, I would probably have been slapped hard. His fists were trembling under the table. No choice then. This was supposed to be a surprise for today, but please take a look at the hidden camera footage in the backstage. Everyone, please feel free to enjoy your drinks and meals. The large screen on the stage showed everything that had happened earlier, without missing a beat. As the video played, the audience watched intently, and gradually voices of discontent started to rise. What's going on here? This is ridiculous. From the crowd, someone asked, "You two are already living together, aren't you?" We met in college, registered our marriage 3 months ago, and have been living together since, leading up to today. The venue was in an uproar. I thought I was marrying John out of love, but it seems I was utterly deceived. I adjusted my life for him, even quitting my job. What has my life been all about? I could hear John clicking his tongue in frustration. A different guest asked, "Lily, what do you want to do now?" The atmosphere had completely turned into that of a press conference. To be honest, this is all so sudden, I haven't had time to think it through. But I have my parents and trustworthy friends. I plan to figure things out together with them. This response led to a series of repeated questions from the crowd. John kept his head down, acting as if this had nothing to do with him. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you must have a lot of things you want to say, so I will leave the stage to him. You can grill him as much as you want. I put down the microphone and moved to the entrance of the venue, watching the scene unfold. John was left alone on the stage. Some young men in the audience, their tempers flaring, stood up and approached John, some even throwing drinks and food at him. All right, I get it. I was dating Natasha. Lily just wasn't enough for me, John confessed. At that moment, my mother-in-law appeared, took the microphone, and addressed everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for my foolish son. If it's not too much trouble, please feel free to give him a piece of your mind. At her signal, people swarmed the stage and surrounded John. I couldn't see John anymore, but I imagined he was getting what he deserved. I thought about how expensive his rental suit was. Concerned about appearances, John had rented the best suit. With this commotion, he would surely have to pay for it. Satisfied after witnessing the chorus of boos from the audience, I returned to the backstage, quickly changed out of my dress, and left the rest to my parents. I also asked them to make sure John couldn't run away from the venue. I wanted to go home immediately. Ever since we started living together, John had been extremely opposed to me entering his room. He would get angry even if I tried to enter for cleaning or searching for something. I suspected there might be some evidence of his infidelity in his room. I asked Kyle to come with me, and we left the venue, heading for home. I was grateful that we had chosen a wedding venue close to our home. Soon we arrived at our house, and the search of John's room began. And then, one thing after another started to come out. Pictures of Natasha and what seemed to be matching accessories, a pair of watches, warranty card, and letters from Natasha were all revealed. It even came to light that he was traveling with Natasha under the guise of business trips. Kyle meticulously photographed each of these items. I gathered all of these items and put them in a cardboard box. It felt like a police search of the house. Once I had all the evidence, I video called my mother-in-law. "Hi, how's everything going over there?" She responded bravely, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. "The guests are getting heated, and John is still being cornered by everyone. That's good to hear. Can you put your phone near the microphone so that my voice can be heard in the venue?" She quickly understood what I meant and did as I asked. "Hello, can you hear me? I'm the bride who was supposed to be the star today." I could sense the murmuring in the venue quieting down. "I know some of you might be angry. I have an important announcement to make." The venue went silent. I will be divorcing John. Unfortunately, today's wedding turned out to be a disaster, but feel free to eat and drink as much as you like and go home whenever you're ready. The cost will be fully charged to John. Wait, I wasn't informed about this. Kyle, who was standing next to me, signaled for me to pass the phone to him. While we're on the subject, I have an announcement too. I'm also divorcing Natasha. The crowd murmured in surprise. "John, Natasha is an expensive woman. She doesn't do any housework, shops every week, and is absolutely incompetent at work. But now, both of you are free, so please, live happily ever after." What am I supposed to do now? You're free to do as you please. Good luck supporting Natasha's lifestyle. I can't afford to support Natasha's lifestyle. Natasha, who was nearby, cut in. I'm not comfortable marrying John either. Then you're all alone. Good riddance. Don't bother coming back home from today onwards. A round of applause erupted in the venue. Drunk guests' voices could be heard saying, "Good for her," and other cheers. Reluctantly, my mother-in-law agreed to let John stay at her house for a while. Warm messages like, "It must have been tough, but you did well. We support you," started arriving on my phone from close friends who were at the venue. Afterwards, the guests reportedly indulged in a grand feast and drinks, and even made sure to take their wedding favors home with them before leaving. A few days after the tumultuous wedding, I was returning to my condo after shopping when I found John standing in front of my door, holding a disproportionately large bouquet of flowers. I came to apologize, hoping you would forgive me. Can I come in? No. Come on, don't be so stubborn. The wedding was just a moment of confusion, right? Absolutely not. John, for some reason, had a smug smile on his face. He tried to hand me the huge bouquet of roses. All women love flowers, right? Cheer up. But I had shopping bags in both hands and couldn't possibly accept the flowers. Not that I wanted to, even if my hands were free. I'm sick of your assumptions and lack of consideration. Just go home. John slowly moved closer to me. I felt threatened and turned my back on him to call my mother-in-law. The back and forth with John continued, and when he tried to force his way into the house with a spare key, my mother-in-law arrived just in time. What the hell are you doing? A shout from my usually refined mother-in-law, which I had never heard before, echoed throughout the area. Mom, why are you here? I came here thinking of making amends with Lily. Don't talk nonsense and just disappear. Do not show your face in front of us ever again. With that, my mother-in-law snatched John's bouquet and hit him square in the face with it. John's face was covered in small cuts from the rose thorns, and torn petals and leaves were scattered all over his body, making for a truly pitiful sight. If you make any more strange moves, I'm calling the police. And don't you even think about coming back to our house. He seemed genuinely scared by her words. John left with his tail between his legs. I'm really sorry about this. Actually, I declared yesterday that I was severing parental ties with him. He left the house, but I never imagined he would be here. While efficiently cleaning up the remains of the bouquet scattered on the floor, my mother-in-law apologized to me over and over again. You don't have to apologize. Please come in and have some tea. No, I'm gonna excuse myself now. If he comes near you again, don't hesitate to contact me. I will protect you no matter what. I was on the verge of tears from her words. I had an ally on my side. I decided to rely on her in times of trouble, and with that, we said our goodbyes. Later on, I managed to finalize the divorce, and I was relieved. Kyle and I each demanded $30,000 in damages from John. I didn't forget to claim the full $20,000 for the wedding expenses, including the gifts for the guests. The guests seemed to have enjoyed themselves quite a bit, and I couldn't help but laugh when I saw the hefty bill. John, unable to cover the costs with his salary alone, had moved to a cheap, small one-room apartment and was working tirelessly day and night. His boss had attended the wedding, which resulted in him losing face at work as well. But he couldn't afford to quit his job because he needed to make ends meet. Now, it seems like he's living every day in a very uncomfortable and awkward position. I heard from my mother-in-law that right after that incident, Natasha broke up with him. Apparently, Natasha had met another man through an online dating site and decided to date him instead. I can hardly imagine that things will go well for them. Especially since Natasha also has to pay us damages. I moved to a smaller but nicer apartment. Moving was a hassle, but I decided it was risky to let John know where I lived. The evidence of John's affair is packed in a large cardboard box sitting in a corner of my new home. So far, the alimony has been paid on time, but I haven't touched the money at all. Thanks to that, my savings have increased significantly. In the midst of all the commotion, a strange kind of fortune befell me. I lost about 15 pounds due to the stress of the divorce. Every time I looked in the mirror, I felt like I had been reborn. I went back to work, and through business contacts, I was able to meet a wonderful man. We are still dating, and every day is fulfilling. I have a good feeling that things will work out with my new partner this time. Welcome home, Linda. The room was a mess, so I cleaned it up for you. What? Why did you? When I got home, not a single item was left in my room. I stood there stunned when my son's wife entered the room, laughing. There's no need to be so shocked. I did it for the good of the house. Her laughter and actions, devoid of any remorse, were completely beyond my comprehension. Where are my things? Over there, looking in the direction she was pointing, I saw flames rising in the yard. Then it hit me. No way. I ran outside barefoot to find my clothes and personal belongings being burned. What shocked me more was what I saw amidst the flames. A painting given to me by my late husband. Now it's nice and clean. Looking at my daughter-in-law, her face was controlled by malice. She was forgetting something far more important. Who is the one supporting this house? Do you know what you've done? Of course. No need to look so scared. Don't joke with me. Well, there's still something left to do, isn't there? The smirk on her face made it clear. Are you trying to drive me out? No, I'm just exterminating a parasite. Even with her changed words, I understood she was referring to me. And that's when I made a decision. Then I'll leave. And so I left the house. But I was not alone in this. Everything was now in place. I swore on my late husband's grave that I would never forgive her. My revenge against my eldest son's wife had begun. My name is Linda Adams, and I'm turning 60 this year. Ever since I lost my beloved husband to cancer 2 years ago, I've been living alone. After he passed away, I felt a great void, but I'm finally getting used to living by myself again. I'm sorry, but I'm counting on you to take care of things from now on. Sure, I know. There's one last thing from me to Linda, a gift. A gift? Yeah, it should be arriving at your house soon. Thanks for everything. Those were my husband's last words. I reminisce about the times I had with him. He was a hardworking businessman at a well-known company. Our meeting came about through a mutual acquaintance. but we quickly hit it off and smoothly progressed to marriage. Since then, it has been nothing but bliss. We have our son now. I have to work even harder. Yeah, but don't overdo it. I have a precious wife and son to look after. At 28, I gave birth to our son John, and 4 years later, our daughter Emily was born. I believe I worked hard every day as a homemaker, which was also my husband's wish. He acknowledged my efforts, and as a result, he left us more than enough savings and assets. However, even in such a life, changes occur. I'll be coming back home soon. Isn't your work too hectic? No, it's settled down now, so it's fine. And I know it's short notice, but thinking of coming back next Saturday. That's fine, I'll be home. I was looking forward to seeing John. It had been a while, but I had forgotten something important. Then on Saturday, I'm home. Welcome back. You must be tired. Take it easy. Hello, Linda, it's been a while. I had completely forgotten, but I was not fond of John's wife, Julie. She had been looking down on me and making snide remarks even before they got married. Welcome, Julie. I offered Julie a strange smile. She seemed to catch on and gave a smirk grin. We're planning to stay over tonight, so please, take care of us. Stay over? I wasn't aware of that. That's strange. I thought you had been informed. Julie began to make herself comfortable as if it were her own home. It almost seemed as if she was testing how comfortable our house was. In the end, they stayed for 2 days, and it was a continuous strain on my heart. I thought that would usher in the return of peaceful daily life. But that was quickly about to change. Mom, I need to talk to you about something. It was about a week later. I had a bad feeling. Actually, Julie has... Hold on a sec. I took a deep breath. Sorry, what about Julie? Oh, right. So, Julie wants to live with you. Live together? It was totally unexpected. I asked for the reason. I thought it was sudden, too, and wondered why. But it seems she's worried about you. Worried? I couldn't help but wonder if that were true. Why she hadn't reached out herself. I told her you are fine, but she won't listen. I see. How are things between you and Julie, then? I think we're okay, but... He said they were fine, but he sounded less than enthusiastic. I thought it was not a good idea to burden my son like this, and... made a suggestion. Then I'll just tell Julie myself that she can't live with us. If I say it directly, she'll give up, right? After hanging up, I looked up at the ceiling. Living with my daughter-in-law was out of the question. Her snooping around my house before must have been her scoping it out for moving in. With that in mind, I just couldn't accept her proposal. Hello? Julie, about the living together thing. I contacted her the next day. I wanted to settle things quickly before they got more complicated. You heard from John, didn't you? Her voice was clearly excited. She must have thought living together was a possibility. I've heard the story. So we can't live together. Then there was a moment of silence. She must have been shaken. Why not? As you get older, wouldn't it be better for you to have someone around? Maybe so, but I'm fine on my own. Don't say that. I'm really worried about you. Your concern is appreciated, but... Right, if that's what you want. It seemed she had accepted it for now. I thought now I could return to my peaceful daily life. Indeed, things seemed calm as usual for the next couple of weeks. But Julie hadn't given up yet. Hello there. One afternoon she came over. Julie, what are you doing here? I've come to talk about a proposal today. Can I come in for a sec? Before getting an answer, she walked right into the house. Taking a seat on the couch as if it were her own, she began to speak. How about we try living together for a bit? Excuse me? We live together on a trial basis, and then decide if we want to make it a permanent arrangement. If you don't like it, I'll move out. I racked my brain desperately. A wrong decision now could lead to irrevocable consequences. Does John know about this? Oh, don't worry about that. Then she began to call my son. I waited for the phone call to end, pondering what to do next. Waiting for the phone call to end, pondering what to do next. John says to talk to you. Here you go. Hello? John? Mom, I'm really sorry. I had no idea Julie would go to you. What are you gonna do? I'm okay with living together. But don't get me wrong, I'm not agreeing with Julie's idea. I just think it's a good way to get her to give up. There was a certain logic to his thoughts. As he said, we could live together for a while and find the right time to say no. Alright, let's do that. Deep down, I feared Julie might disrupt our home, but if things went south, she could just leave. And so our living together began. At first, everything was peaceful. Things changed when John started spending more time away from home due to work. Sorry, I'm too busy to help out around the house right now. Don't worry about it. Instead, I'll take care of the expenses. Don't fuss over it. Leave it to me. Soon after, he left for a long business trip. And as if she had been waiting for him to leave, her attitude changed dramatically. Are you not good at cooking? It was during one of our meals together. What? Well, it just feels a bit dated and plain. Even dog food might be better. She laughed mockingly, revealing her true colors. From then on, all pretense was dropped. Another day, as I was sorting out the laundry in the living room, she exclaimed, "Did you mix our laundry together again?" It's not necessary to separate them. She sighed heavily. When you mix them, your old lady's smell gets on my clothes. Please do mine separately next time. Oh, and rewash mine, will you? Hey, where do you think you're going? I've got plans with friends. She never lifted a finger to help, preferring to gallivant about instead. I couldn't stand it any longer. Your behavior lately has been too much. I'm gonna have to tell John about this. I thought this would definitely calm things down, but she was not a woman to fold so easily. Don't joke with me. I'm here out of the goodness of my heart. What on earth was she talking about? Even though the arrival of Julie had completely disrupted our daily life, if you go snitching, it won't end well for you. With that, she threw a picture frame that was nearby at me. And it was a picture of my husband and me, no less. At that moment, I felt everything I had been holding back just overflowed. Such a thing. Okay, I'll be able to get back soon, Mom. We'll talk in detail then. All right, John. 3 months after we started living together, because of what had happened before, I talked to my son about ending the living arrangement. He didn't seem surprised when I called and readily agreed. It was just 3 days before he was due to return. I'll be coming back soon, Mom, Emily said. Something happened? Well, our lives were about to change even further. My daughter, who had been married and living in another state, came back home. Sorry for the suddenness, she said. It's fine. But what happened? As I listened to her, she revealed that her husband's infidelity had led to her divorce. You can stay here for a while? You've been through a lot, after all. But there's a problem, I explained to her. So Julie is living with you, right? John is going to be back from his business trip soon, so we will talk things over then. I see. I'm the newbie here, but I'll help out as much as I can. Thank you. It's reassuring to have you, Emily. That night when Julie arrived at home, she asked, "Hey, Emily. Why are you here?" Well, a lot has happened. I'll be staying here for a while. Okay, Julie and Emily hadn't met that often, but for some reason, Julie seemed to have taken a liking to my daughter. Perhaps because Emily is older, Julie thinks of her like a real sister. Maybe because of that, Julie seemed unusually well-behaved when my daughter was around. Seems like Julie has taken to you, so we might use that to our advantage, I said. Indeed. We must be careful not to let on what we're planning. The next day my son returned. I'm home, he said. As I went to greet him at the door, his wife pushed past me. You're in the way, she said. I stumbled from her shove. Hey, isn't that a bit dangerous? Just act your age, will you? I mean, you're an old lady. How many times have I seen her laughing while looking at me? At this point, I'm truly astounded by what she wants to do. What are you doing here, Mom? Just lost in thought, that's all. Emily came back, right? Haven't seen her since Dad's funeral. She'll probably be back soon. Then, about an hour later, we had dinner with my daughter who had just come home. When it's just the two of us, my daughter complains, but even she can't in this situation. It's been a really long time since we had such a peaceful family meal, I said. My son's wife seemed to be in a better mood and started drinking. Julie, don't you think you're drinking too much? I'm fine. This is nothing. Is she not feeling well? With alcohol? I don't think that's the case. But my son's wife continued to pick on me, emboldened by the alcohol. Why don't you have a drink with us? I'm not good with alcohol. What? What are you talking about? You can't take my request? I couldn't help but sigh. That's enough, right? Right? You're clearly drunk. I'm still okay. I'm worried too, if Emily says so. In the end, Julie was taken to her room by my daughter. Looks like Julie's gone to sleep. If she's drunk and asleep, she won't be up for a while, so it should be fine. Then it's time for the main event. And so the three of us talked about Julie. We intended to tell her that we were going to dissolve the living arrangement anyway. Are you okay with that, John? She is your wife after all. I have my share of the blame for letting things get out of hand. But what's the right thing to do? We were at our wits' end. No good ideas came to mind and time just passed. Then my daughter asked a question. First off, why did Julie want to live with us in the first place? Hearing that, I indeed wondered. I realized I had never asked her or my son for a clear reason. John, don't you know anything? Last time I asked, she said she was worried about Mom, but that's probably a lie. Like, what if it's this house she's after? It's pretty big after all. That could be possible. Even before and after moving in together, I felt like Julie was always sizing up everything in the house. So how about this idea? Emily came to us with a suggestion. It was a proposal we hadn't even considered, and John and I looked at each other. But it might be a burden on Mom. After a bit of thought, I realized it might be a good way to break the current stalemate. Yeah, since it's Emily's idea, why not go for it? What do you think, John? I'm okay with it too. And so, we each started to make our moves. Of course, this was a secret from John's wife. A week later, everything was ready. However, since there was a chance of being turned down for any number of reasons, if I talked about it alone, we decided to bring up the living arrangement issue again, all three of us together. And we decided to execute our plan in 2 days. The day before, Julie, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna head out for a bit. When will you be back? Well, I should be back by the evening. Got it? She seemed unusually happy, but I didn't think much of it. 'Cause by tomorrow I'll be saying goodbye to this life. The only worry is leaving John's wife at home alone. But I'm looking forward to catching up with a friend for the first time in a while, and had completely forgotten about that. I'm home. I returned around 4 p.m., but I couldn't find John's wife. Then unexpectedly, she came out of my room. Welcome back, Linda. It was dirty, so I cleaned it up for you. Why are you coming out of my room? You'll see if you look. What? Why is this happening? Nothing was left in my room. As I stood there in shock, John's wife entered the room, laughing. You don't need to be so surprised. I did it for the good of the house. What are you talking about? Her behavior and laughter without a hint of remorse were completely baffling. Where are my things? Over there. I followed where she pointed and saw flames in the yard. That's when it hit me. No way. I ran outside barefoot, and my clothes and belongings were being burned. Then, I saw something that truly shocked me. Among the flames was a painting, a gift from my late husband. This cleans everything up nicely. Looking at John's wife's face, I could see it was filled with hatred. She had forgotten something important. Who really supports this house? Do you know what you've done? Of course. Don't look at me like that, you're scaring me. Stop joking around. Well, there are still things we gotta do, right? My son's wife grinned at me. Are you trying to kick me out? No. I'm just dealing with a parasite. Despite the sugarcoating, I knew she was talking about me. And so I made a decision, then I'll leave. I left the house, but it wasn't just me. Swearing on my late husband, I vowed revenge on my son's wife. Are you really okay with this? Julie had asked me that just before I left, but I didn't look at her. I could easily imagine the expression on her face. I called my son and daughter as I headed to my new place. I'm moving to the new house today, a bit ahead of schedule. Got it, I'll tell Emily. Then I'll see you there. When I arrived at the new house, I sat on the sofa. I felt a bit excited about starting a new life. About an hour later, John and Emily arrived. I didn't expect such an amazing house. How did you manage to get a place like this? I asked. A friend of your father's told me about this vacant house. It kind of resembles our old place too, so I made a quick decision. We had a pleasant time, but soon we all wore serious expressions. For now, let's just give Julie the address. Given her nature, she'll definitely come by. Then I'll take care of that. Thanks. After a while, I had dozens of messages and missed calls. Are we ignoring these, right? Yes. We then waited for my eldest son's wife to grow impatient and visit. After spending a few days relaxing in the new place, someone visited us. Looking at the outside through the window, there stood Julie, looking exhausted. She's here. Time to greet her. I'm kind of nervous. Don't worry, there are 3 of us. I knew this was the moment of truth. You came, Julie. What's this all about, Linda? What do you mean? Why are you living in such an amazing place? Well, you're asking me why. Let's just go to the living room for now. So all the players were present. We faced each other in the living room. I didn't know you had so much money, Linda. Well, of course you didn't. I didn't tell you. From now on, we plan to live here together. Sorry for keeping it a secret. Suddenly, my son's wife's demeanor completely changed to a smile. Perhaps she thought she would be able to live in this house, too. Well, you could have said something sooner. Why were you keeping it from me, John? Mom told me not to say anything about it. Like a surprise? Trying not to laugh was a struggle as I watched my son's wife, who had gotten the wrong end of the stick, and was getting all excited. The first to break the news was Emily. Julie, I'm sorry, but it's just going to be us living here. What? Her eyes went wide as saucers. Emily's right. There's no place for you in this house. Why not? You destroyed my most cherished memory. That was because you were the one who suggested living together. But I bet you really wanted to drive me out. What were you after, my house or money? My son's wife looked down in silence. She must have hit the nail on the head. But why such a mansion? Did you ask John for this? This time my son interjected. You seem to be under some misconception, but since we've been living together, I haven't paid a cent for living expenses. What? Mom's been covering it all for us. And yet you... My son's wife stood there as if frozen in disbelief. That's a lie. It's not a lie. I didn't want to burden John, so I paid for everything. You wouldn't know that. Then she started to smile at me ingratiatingly. We got our wires crossed a bit, but there's still time to make it right. Let's start over. She went on and on about how much better it would be for her to live with us. I, finding the situation absurdly funny, took her hand and smiled sweetly. You're the parasite. Why don't you take a good look at yourself in the mirror? John, say something. You're on my side, right? I thought I was, but there's no excuse for this level of awfulness. Don't be ridiculous. Why am I the one? Just give it up. No matter how much you beg, this fact won't change. But I will never forgive you for what you did to me. No one in the room was on my son's wife's side, not even her husband. As I watched her face contort with despair, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. That's the deal. So you need to leave this house and that house too. That house too? Well, that house is in my name, and I can't let a stranger live there. A stranger, you mean? Sadly, that's the situation. At that, my son's wife began to scream, throwing and smashing things around her. Call the cops. John, stop her. Okay, I got it. My daughter quickly phoned the police. Stop this rampage now. Hey, back off. The situation was finally brought under control when my son tackled and restrained the one causing chaos. In the end, my son's wife, Julie, was escorted away by the police, sandwiched between officers. She glared at us as she got into the squad car, but at this point there was nothing we could do. I felt no sympathy, just a sense of serves you right. Above all, she was getting her just desserts for ruthlessly destroying the memories of my husband. Were you shocked? But this is for the best, right? Yeah. Now we'll finally have peace. The rest is up to John. I've got it covered. After everything that's happened, I can't live with her anymore. I have faith that he will handle things well. Emily and I are here too. I'm counting on you. Afterward, John and Julie got divorced. Of course, it wasn't an easy process. She cried and screamed during the discussions with the lawyers, trying to garner sympathy. Her demeanor was fierce, but my son dismissed it outright. I was present as well, and I was just astonished by her pitiful display. Cut it out already? Please keep out of this. It's your fault this is happening. Stop blaming others. You brought this upon yourself. That's right. Just stop it. No matter how much you beg, I'm not changing my mind. That's the way it is. I smiled, including all the times she had smiled in the past to show I meant it. There's no need to hold back anymore. I really felt like applauding my son for choosing to divorce. Complain all you want, but don't bother us. I wouldn't want to have anything else burned. Since that day, Julie stopped complaining and we finally had peace. I felt a slight easing of the guilt I had towards my husband. Turns out Julie, now evicted and jobless, was hopping from one friend's house to another. Having become a housewife upon marrying my son, she had no employment. I'm curious to see what life has in store for her. Is it okay for us to live here now? Indeed, I've said plenty to Julie, but don't worry about it. You're welcome to stay as long as you like. The ashes may remain, but not all memories of my husband have disappeared. From now on, the three of us will walk towards a bright future together. The land that was in my mother-in-law's name, I've gone ahead and changed it to my name. The eldest son's wife, who had unilaterally changed the deed of the land I inherited from my late husband into her name. It's true that we never got along, but I never expected her to go this far. When I looked to my eldest son for help, there he was, looking at me with a cold gaze. Always picking on my wife. You're the worst, Mom. If you have even a shred of remorse, just graciously hand over the land to my wife and show some sincerity by living out the rest of your life as a maid. My eldest son was taking his wife's side. Let me be clear, I never intended to pick on her. If anything, I was the one being bullied. But in this situation, I didn't think anything I said would get through. I became so fed up with trying to persuade them, I decided to leave. Just as the eldest son's wife suggested. So I should be the one to leave, right? I asked to be sure, only to be mocked for not crying and for putting on a brave face. But I wonder who's really putting on a brave face. After I leave, what will become of these two? They probably haven't realized yet. My husband and I were both in our late 50s. We have 2 sons, who are both married with their own families, living away from home. So now it's just the 2 of us, living a quiet couple's life. Where we live is the epitome of the countryside that anyone would imagine. Without a car, it's inconvenient to get to the nearest train station, and there's a bus. But it only runs about twice an hour during commute times and doesn't operate on Sundays or holidays. There's a liquor store that doubles as a convenience store, in name only, standing alone at the center of the village. My eldest son despised this rural lifestyle. He wanted to go to a more prosperous high school in the nearby area, but ended up reluctantly attending a local agricultural school because his grades weren't good enough. With that resentment, upon graduating high school, he left home. Left home as if fleeing. My eldest son married a woman he met while living in the city he always dreamed of, and he has continued to live there, rarely visiting his childhood home. The eldest son and his wife have returned home a few times for marriage greetings, but other than that, they don't come by at all, nor do they get in touch. Still, they are family, and sometimes there are urgent matters that can't be ignored. In our family, it has been the daughters-in-law who have traditionally handled matters concerning the house. Even without close friendships, it's been that way. So, when I've needed to see my eldest son's wife, I've been the one to make the trip. Because my daughter-in-law really dislikes the countryside. When I visit, she says I bring a country smell and sprays air freshener around me. At first, it bothered me, but now I've learned to let it slide as a trivial matter. Especially because our relationship is already distant, and I didn't want to make it more awkward. Meanwhile, my second son lives in a remote area due to his job. The town where the second son and his wife live isn't much different from the rural town where he grew up. The second son says driving isn't too much of a hassle for him, and he often comes home to check on us, his parents. His wife is a charming woman with a generous nature, and we share similar values, which is why our relationship with her is exceptionally good. Then, while still in my late 50s, my husband passed away unexpectedly. I was engulfed in sorrow. My husband often said that when he passed away first, his only wish was that I wouldn't struggle and would complete the rest of my life without hardship. He said that if the land and house that have been passed down through his ancestors became too much for me to handle or a hindrance in my life, I should prioritize my life over them. In other words, once I inherited them, I could do as I pleased. My husband did talk to our eldest son about inheriting the land and house, a family tradition. But my city-loving eldest son, and especially his wife, vehemently refused, saying, unless it's prime real estate in a major city like New York, inheriting worthless rural land is pointless. So the eldest son followed her wish and desired something else. The second son also preferred something other than the land and house, so he inherited other assets. I learned later that the second son thought it best for me to inherit the place filled with our memories. The second son and his wife considered moving back and living with me, but they decided against it because it would be too much of a burden on his commute. Still, they've told me warmly not to overdo it on my own, and that if it ever became unavoidable, they would be open to living together at home. I have no intention of sacrificing my sons' lives to be tied down to the land and house. When the time comes, I'll make a clean decision. Thus I took the land and house, and the sons split the remaining assets evenly. After a while, development began nearby, and the value of the land started to rise. I'm in my 60s now, but I still have plenty of energy and enthusiasm for country life. As the development proceeds, the opinions and feelings about it vary among the people. For me, if a supermarket is built close by, I won't need to drive, and it could help avoid family disputes over issues like giving up driving licenses in old age. Most importantly, if it reduces the worries of my caring second son and his wife, then the development isn't all bad. I'm honestly excited about possibly having a more convenient life. However, I never imagined that my peace would be disrupted by the unexpected actions of my eldest son's wife. As the development progressed, and rumors spread about an increase in bus services to the nearest station and the construction of high-rise apartments nearby, my estranged eldest son reached out. He said something along the lines of, "My attempt to make it big in the city has failed, and I've ended up quitting my job. Trying to earn a living in the city was a fleeting dream." I urged him to get to the point. Then he expressed a desire to return and live at home. When I asked him, "So you want to live together?" he seemed to affirm, but with hesitant phrasing. About a month ago, at my husband's third-year memorial, a family gathering took place. At that time, my eldest son still complained about the countryside odor, so what had changed his mind? In the middle of our conversation, his wife abruptly interjected, "You really live in a lovely place. If it's getting all modern with the land development, you should have said so. Some places have gotten a better view since the mountain trees were cut down. There have been rumors for quite a while that a large shopping mall might go in there." The eldest son's wife didn't care about the countryside property before, thinking it wasn't worth considering, but now that it's developing into a more livable area, she's singing a different tune. The land and house my husband left us are in a very good location. Besides the spot where our house stands, the mountain behind our home is also land I inherited from my husband. There's going to be land purchases with the development, right? Are you going to let go of mountain behind the house? I see the eldest son and his wife regret not caring for this countryside property before. They can't say they want to inherit the land now, so they're cozying up to me, probably wanting a cut of the money if I sell the mountain. Oh dear, how awful of me. The real issue isn't money, it's about my husband. I listened skeptically to the eldest son's wife's excuses, which seemed quite theatrical. It felt like I was being subjected to a poor speech. To put it simply, it appears true that the eldest son has lost his job and is now unemployed. Their savings are so low that they are worried about next month's rent. When I asked about the inheritance split with the younger son, she would rather not touch that if possible. It has only been 3 years since my husband's death, so she says she wants to be thoughtful about how to use the money he left. However, if they are struggling that much, they should use it. I thought about saying this, but I held back as it would likely result in accusations of being cold-hearted. The eldest son's wife, struggling to pay for rent, gas, and electricity, makes a heartfelt appeal with her voice choked with tears. She is asking to move in with me, live in the countryside? You, who hated the countryside and were adamant about living in the city. I suggested that the eldest son take over and ask if he will find a job in the countryside. Wouldn't it be better for him to find employment in the city? I asked. It was hard to imagine the eldest son, who left for the city as if he was running away from home, accepting a rural life now. The eldest son says he is in a tight spot and soon even eating will become difficult, so he is asking for help. Until the very end, he does not clearly state whether he is looking to find employment in the city or the countryside. So I set conditions. Moving in is temporary just until the eldest son finds a new job. I also added that he needs to work, even if it is just part-time while living with us. In this area, with the land development, there is an increase in short-term job postings. I figured he would get hired if he was not too picky. I thought that if I take care of them for about 6 months, they would save up a decent amount of money and be ready for a fresh start. Marriage is about helping each other out, after all. I assumed the eldest son's wife would also work outside, even if not every day, to help gather funds for their new start. But when we actually started living together, all my plans fell apart. The eldest son was indeed busy looking for work. He searched for jobs during the day and worked as a security guard at construction sites for a few hours in the evening. The eldest son's wife, who had been meek at first, changed her tune as soon as her husband started spending long hours away from home for job hunting and part-time work. "Oh, this is such a drag. I can't stand it," she complained. Using a pickup for shopping was just too tacky for her. Shopping had become a once-a-week affair, and the convenience of a pickup truck was simply unmatched, unlike the fancy cars you would see in the city. She was the one who had offered to do the shopping. But after going once, she complained that the pickup was too embarrassing and refused to go again. In front of her husband, she would praise my cooking and express a desire to learn. But in reality, she was not willing to make any sacrifices. Learn, but when he wasn't around, she would do the exact opposite. She couldn't stand the country-style cooking, craving French cuisine instead. She would complain about her mom's home cooking being annoying, and then skip her turn to cook. One day, my eldest son's wife said she was going to cook dinner tonight, so trusting her word, I headed off to tend to the backwoods. Without regular checkups and asking folks to cut down trees, the woods can quickly become wild. It's especially important around the change of seasons and dealing with fallen leaves. Since my husband passed, I have been hiring some young folks from the community to help out. But I can't always rely on others, so I sometimes go to check on things myself. After making my rounds in the mountains, I came home exhausted in the evening, only to find no lights on in the house and the doors locked, leaving me unable to get in. I tried calling my eldest son's wife's cell, but couldn't get through, and was at my wit's end when my son came home. As I was explaining the situation, the eldest son's wife arrived, so I confronted her, asking where she had been and why she had locked up. "How could you?" she snapped. "I did just like you told me, went shopping, and you forgot what you asked for." She went on to tell my son that I insisted on having some fancy dish for dinner, and said if she couldn't serve that dish tonight, she should leave the house. I never said any such thing, and didn't even know I had been left alone. But my son just took his wife's side without question. Just because we're living together reluctantly, doesn't mean you should pick on my wife. She's not used to country living. You can't expect her to find ingredients for some fancy dishes out here in the boonies. He accused me of deliberately making her go out as a form of harassment, even though he knew better. My son and I have always had our differences, and have had our fair share of arguments in the past, but this was the first time I was berated so unfairly and one-sidedly. I was looking at my son, and yet he felt like a stranger, which was heartbreaking. I don't demand he take my side. But in the world, husbands tend to have a happier marriage when they side with their wives. And my late husband always stood by me. However, he always made sure to listen to both sides, so we had a good relationship with his mother while she was alive. But my son just yells at me, taking his wife's word over mine. Suddenly he turned surly and said, "Well, that fancy dish you're so keen on? Go ahead and make it yourself and eat all you want. I'm taking my wife out to eat." He snatched the keys from his wife and threw them at me before heading back the way he came. When I entered the house, I saw that my son's wife hadn't done a stitch of housework. It was just as I left it in the morning. I was so upset I couldn't stop crying. But there was so much to do, it almost seemed like a waste to wipe away the tears. To wipe away the tears, I just got on with the chores while crying. Later, the owner of the only diner around here, where we used to go as a family when the kids were little, came by to see if I was all right. My husband and the diner owner were childhood friends, and I knew my son was aware of his dad's fondness for the place. It turns out my son and his wife had been bad-mouthing me there. The owner said my son's wife was the one filling his head with all this stuff about me. I didn't go into details, just thanked the owner for letting me know. He said to call if I ever needed anything and didn't pry further, though he looked sad, saying, "Guess people change when they move to the city, huh?" After all this, I decided not to expect anything from my son's wife anymore. If my efforts to get along don't get through, then it's just a waste of time. Better to spend that time and energy getting the chores done myself. I'd be no different from my son's wife if I thought about getting back at her for what she did. As usual, no matter what my son's wife did, I prepared meals for 3 and did the laundry for 3. Whether she thought it was her due or was pleased to have manipulated things in her favor, she continued to act like a guest in the house. Then one day she came out with something that floored me. "This property and house that's in your name, I'm in the process of transferring it to my name." She claimed that she already had all the paperwork ready, flashing the documents at me. But since she didn't show them clearly, it only increased my suspicion about her story. Given my familiarity with such papers, from when my husband transferred the property to me, they looked like obvious fakes. When I asked her if they were real, she retorted, "Of course they are. From now on, I'm taking over as the head of this household. If you don't want to be kicked out, then show some remorse and apologize for the way you've treated your daughter-in-law. How about this? Continue to live here as my personal maid. If that doesn't suit you, you're welcome to leave." Her bold attitude suggested she believed the documents she held were legitimate. I confronted my eldest son, demanding an explanation. "Shouldn't you be the one leaving if you can't keep your promise to live together?" I tried to argue with common sense, but my eldest son retorted that I was the one who broke our promise first. It's a shame to be raised by the worst kind of mother who bullies her daughter-in-law. If you feel bad about it, then, as a mother, you should just retire and leave everything to your son. Just because we've clashed, doesn't mean you should take it out on my wife out of spite. That's the lowest thing a person can do. Aren't you ashamed, a grown woman acting like this? My daughter-in-law managed to convince my son that I was harsh on her because I hated him. Using what she had heard about our differences in values and our incompatible temperaments, she manipulated my son into believing that I was the one at fault. My daughter-in-law took advantage of the situation. Given that my relationship with my eldest son was already strained, it was easy for her to make things worse. Realizing that nothing I said to my son now would be believed, I felt that trying to persuade him was a waste of energy. Suddenly, my husband's words crossed my mind. "Fine, I'll consider everything you've said. But I need a week's grace period because I have preparations of my own." I consented. My daughter-in-law was reluctant, but my eldest son agreed. It took exactly 1 week to sort out what belongings to take and to find a new place to move to, among other necessary arrangements. After the agreed week, I left the house. As I was leaving, my daughter-in-law taunted me with a triumphant look, telling me to get out. I didn't respond to her insults and left the house in silence, giving myself a mental fist pump. This was the beginning of my comeback. 1 month later, just as I expected, I received a frantic call from my daughter-in-law. She was in a frenzy, because when she tried to cash in by selling the land immediately, she was told it was already in the process of being subdivided and couldn't be sold. "What have you done?" she screamed in a shrill voice that was unbearable, spewing insults like a machine gun. In the midst of local land development, there had been an offer to buy the forested hill behind our house along with the land as a package. The condition was that it had to be sold as a set. It was a welcome offer, as managing the hill on my own was challenging. Yet, I still had a desire to live in the house I had shared with my husband a bit longer, so I put the offer on hold. During this time, the issue of our home's deterioration came up. A relative in construction had mentioned concerns about our ancestral home's aging condition when they visited for my husband's memorial service. The house felt too large for just me alone. A sharp contrast to when it felt just right for 3 generations. I couldn't deny a sense of loneliness being left behind in it. Even if I rebuilt the house, my sons probably wouldn't live there anyway. I began to think it might be best to sell it after my husband's 7th death anniversary. The company interested in buying the forest and land told me such developments take years, so there was no rush. However, the start of cohabitation with my eldest son and his wife gradually shifted my plans. Determined not to wait until my husband's 7th memorial, I decided to let go of the house. The company even offered to cover the cost of demolishing the house and clearing the land, which was a relief to me. I couldn't bear the thought of my eldest son's wife, who believed she had a genuine contract, doing as she pleased with the property. My eldest son, who followed his wife's words without any doubt, informed my younger son of everything that had happened and shared my decision. He expressed sadness about the family home being sold, but reminded me that memories are held in the heart, not in material possessions. My younger son and his wife kindly offered for me to live with them. While I have some anxiety about leaving my familiar home, I believe I will come to enjoy the rural area they live in. I am currently living with my second son and his wife, and I am grateful for their kindness. I choose to ignore the first son's wife screaming and end the call myself at the right moment, blocking any incoming calls. Later, my eldest son, after asking around about my whereabouts, came to my second son's house in tears, asking for my help. Thinking it was too late, I was about to send him away, but then he explained how his wife had kicked me out and manipulated him. It all started when a friend of his wife introduced her to a paralegal. She trusted her friend and believed the paralegal without any doubt. She was told she could transfer the land and house from my name to hers by simply paying a thank you fee, which was promised to be less than half the market rate. She also believed that any shortfall from my husband's estate could be covered once a large sum of money came in. On the promised day, the friend and the paralegal prepared the transfer documents, and the first son's wife handed over the thank you fee without any suspicion. She eagerly explained everything to the eldest son when he returned from his part-time job, and in his exhaustion, he trusted her words as the truth without questioning. It may seem strange that the wife becomes the homeowner while her husband is still alive, but she convinced him by saying it would be more convenient for me. As a fellow housewife, she promised to have a heart-to-heart with me and work things out. He foolishly agreed after being told such a plausible story. While the eldest son was out looking for a job and doing part-time work, the first son's wife methodically planned to kick me out and successfully did so by brainwashing the eldest son behind my back. However, when she tried to sell the house and land, she was told it was impossible because the land was still being divided. She became desperate and tried to contact the friend and the paralegal, but they were unreachable. Eventually, their phone got disconnected, and when she contacted the friend's parents' house, she was told they had disowned the criminal and did not know her whereabouts. That was when she finally learned that her friend was a repeat fraudster and a convicted criminal. The first son's wife later found out that many of her former classmates had been victims of this friend. The friend had been introducing former classmates as fake lawyers, accountants, and paralegals, and swindling them out of their service fees. The first son's wife had mentioned the land to her friend, which led to the introduction of the so-called paralegal. Among the victims, some had filed police reports, while others had given up, considering it a costly lesson. Those people could say that because they still had a home, even though they lost money. The eldest son and his wife, having lost money, their home, and the inheritance, had to focus on sorting out the situation before even considering filing a complaint. When I suggested that they should be able to rent an apartment, since most of the inheritance should still be there, the eldest son said that the ATM card for the account where the inheritance was deposited had been swapped out with a different card. By the time they realized, all the money had been withdrawn. He came begging, genuinely broke, pleading for help. He explained that the first son's wife had been told that additional charges had arisen because the document preparation had been quite a hassle, and she went to withdraw money with her friend. That's probably when the pin was stolen. I've heard that if you hire a professional to swap cards, you won't even notice it. Driven by immediate greed and lacking attention, the first son's wife had become an easy target after blabbering about the inheritance to her friend. I heard that a little while back, warnings had been circulating from the alma mater of my eldest son's wife. They had been alerting that a graduate had been repeatedly defrauding classmates and juniors, so be careful with contacts and offers from people you don't usually keep in touch with. But the first son's wife, thinking only idiots fall for scams, ignored the alerts. I turned away from my eldest son and his wife, believing they got what they deserved for being driven by greed. Though the inheritance was gone, I was sure the eldest had some money saved from his part-time job. But that measly part-time pay? Gone with the wind on drink tabs, for sure. Led astray by drinking buddies, his savings from part-time work dwindled to nothing. It's your own fault for not planning ahead. I rebuffed him once more. Just as I was getting troubled by his persistence, my daughter-in-law from my second son came home. Her return, GI slung over her shoulder, radiated such a force that my eldest felt a threat and skedaddled. The second son's wife had recently taken up self-defense as a hobby. When the homeward-bound daughter-in-law from martial arts classes ran into the lingering eldest, he got scared and beat it. Saved by the bell. I thanked my daughter-in-law for my second son for the timely rescue. The eldest son and his wife having been living as live-in workers at a diner run by a childhood friend of my husband. I was fired for constantly complaining about the low pay compared to the big city. Do they even understand the concept of gratitude? After that, no one was willing to help my eldest son and his wife. They somehow managed to survive until one day, a new house was built on the land where we used to live. Upon seeing this, my eldest son's wife became angry and broke in, claiming that it was her land and house. Her nonsensical behavior and squatting led to the police being called and her immediate arrest. I was contacted by the police as a potential guarantor, but I refused. She then refused to speak unless her mother was present. The police asked for my help in persuading her, but I also refused. They informed me that my son was asking for help, but I felt no obligation to assist and suggested that they simply lock him up. When my son's wife was arrested, she claimed that she had been tricked by a fraud. Apparently there were several similar complaints filed, which made her story seem believable, but that does not excuse her crimes. She was punished to the fullest extent of the law, and I heard that the friend and fake paralegal who committed the fraud are still at large. Even if they are caught, my son was told that the stolen money would not be returned. It seems that he has finally realized the truth after his inheritance was not only used without permission but also stolen. The couple divorced and went their separate ways, but my eldest son continues to struggle with finding stable work. His ex-wife, tired of living in the countryside, disappeared one day after working at a questionable bar in the city, leaving behind significant debts. I have now officially moved in with my second son and his wife. This living arrangement started as a trial due to the difficulties with my eldest son's family. I did not want to burden my daughter-in-law, but living together has turned out to be wonderful. We can speak freely without tension and get along well, since she is not overbearing. Most importantly, we share the same interests and exchange recipes, making each day enjoyable. The considerate environment we have created does not require us to follow unnecessary formalities. Our neighbors even mistake my daughter-in-law and me for mother and daughter. That's how well we get along. As my husband would have wanted, I am cherishing my life with my second son and his family. I look forward to sharing these stories, and I prayed at my husband's grave.